Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast and welcome to Theory Thursday. This is our show where we get together and we have a look at one particular element of Blood Bowl. We take a deep dive on it, whether it's stats or strats, with a goal of trying to get better at this game that we all love. Now, this one has been brewing for a very long time. Someone suggested it maybe about a year ago. But we've got Blood Bowl 3 up and running now, we've got the Fumble League up and running now. League is just a fantastic way to play Blood Bowl, and one of the underestimated elements of League is hiring and firing. Now, I've called this one the art of letting go. Imagine this. You've built up a player, you've built up a great team, and you suffer a serious injury. They lose a stat, your TV's getting bloated. At what point do you consider letting go of that player? At what point do you consider replacing players? So that's what we're going to have a look at today, hiring and firing. All right, first things first, when to fire a player. Now, if you're playing League, if you're playing Constructed, if you're playing Resurrection, this means nothing to you. If you're playing tournaments, this means nothing to you. If you're playing League, this means everything to you. And I guess there's a couple of elements here that we really want to touch on first, and we will touch on basically every time we go through one of the points, is when in your league. And that's something you will have to consider. Is it early on in your league where your team's developing? Is it near to the playoffs? How long is your league? Is it a team you're going to redraft again next year? We'll talk through that as we go, because those are all things you have to have in the back of your mind. Not something you need to worry about for Constructed Blood Bowl, but definitely for League it is. So when to fire a player. The most obvious one of all is serious injury. So if they suffer a stat damage, if your War Dancer gets movement busted, if your Black Orc loses a point of strength, if your Ogre loses a point of armor, you're looking at them and you're thinking, are they still okay to play? They're definitely not firing on all cylinders. Now, in League, there's two things you can do. You can fire them, and if you've got enough gold, you can just replace them. You lose all their SPP, it's a new guy. In League, where you've got seasons, you can can't remember what it was, but medical leave, we'll say that, but you can't replace them. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that this is a kind of like, you're going to get rid of them and replace them. And we'll probably touch on early medical leave at some other point. I can't remember what it's called, but I wouldn't worry too much about it for now. So, stat damage, bad random skill. Now, this is definitely important if you're playing a lot of Blood Bowl 3, but also, quite frankly, for tabletop, if you're chucking a random on a slow developing player, whether they're a big guy, whether they are a secret weapon, or quite frankly alignment. If you roll a random skill and you don't really like it, or it's pretty useless, if you watch the Bonehead Championship, Trumpets rolled Shadowing, a movement 5 Snotling rolled Shadowing. That would be a wonderful example of a bad random skill, because they all affect your team value, and team value management is the last thing you want to think about when you're contemplating releasing a player, because actually Trumpets is a cracking example. Give him a random general, that's 20k, he's 15k, that player is now 35k, a Snotling is 15k, so here's twice the price of a standard Snotling. Is it worthwhile, or would I rather have the money to have two Snotlings? That's kind of where you can start thinking about it. And TV management is massive for those teams that weigh heavily in League on inducements. If you want to make sure you can take Griff, Hackflem, Skitter, Morg, then you need to make sure that you are getting rid of bloat, getting rid of team value bloat, which goes straight into team value management. Okay, so keeping the gap low. We just touched on this, but if you are running a league and you've got a team that likes to induce star players, or just likes to have access to inducements. Now, immediately you think, right, halflings, they like to take Morg and Griff and Carla and the Goatman, and potentially Rodney Roachbait, the new Gnome star. Gnomes could be one of those teams that you want to keep your team value low so you can do the thing. from a star player point of view, and also from a halfling master chef point of view as well. If you are building up a halfling team or potentially a gnome team and you're keeping your rerolls at 1 or 2 and you want to lean heavily on making sure you've got 100k petty cash in a game to take that halfling master chef, you want to keep your team value low, which means you want to consider taking those randoms, and if they're no good, getting rid of the player. If the player is injured and subpar, getting rid of the player, because you want to make sure that your team value is as low as possible. Stunty star teams. Yeah, right, we just talked about that. That's perfect. Whoa, too fast. Let's go back, because there's one thing I want to mention on team value management before we move on. That's not just Stunty and Starbury. This is, you're in your league and you're brewing up a big team. This is really important and kind of goes a little bit forgotten about, because you think team value management, right, let's keep the team value low so I can have all the inducements. Well, actually, there's an element here where you want to manage your own team value if you're not an inducement heavy team to stop them from getting all the inducements. Now, with this edition of Blood Bowl, we've got some pretty powerful star players, which, you know, your mileage may vary, but this is the place where inducements are giving enough opportunity to win that they're worth considering. In the last editions of Blood Bowl, don't fight me on this, I know there's some exceptions, but generally speaking, you went to a league game, you got X 100k in inducements, and it really didn't matter. In this edition, you start sweating if you give your opponent 240k, because they can take Carla, they can take Hackflem. If they get 300k, you know you're going against Griff. 350k, you know they're getting Morg. No, Morg's 380 now. Woohoo! All right, my point is, if you're running a mid-range team, a high-edge team, a team where you've got good players with good skills, you've got a good amount of rerolls, you're going to have a good amount of team value. You're going to want to manage that, because if you're giving them 300, 400, 500,000 gold pieces for inducements each game, you are making a rod for your own back, because this is where the stars come in. This is where the wizards come in. And that is as close to equal as you can get on the Blood Bowl pitch. Okay, we spoiled it before, but bad random skills. So, Blood Bowl 3. Why do I say Blood Bowl 3? Blood Bowl 3 gives you the opportunity to jam 2, 3, 4 games a night if you want. Tabletop Blood Bowl, you're looking at 2 games a week if you are the luckiest sausage in the packet, to be fair, okay? Sometimes, yeah, that's a generalization, but most leagues play once a week. You're looking at maybe 3, 4 games a month for your team. Blood Bowl 3, you're looking at 3, 4 games a night if someone leaves you alone for a few hours. But I think 3 to 4 games a week is very realistic on Blood Bowl 3 if you want to jam those games in. And this is where skill roulette can really pay off, because you take a lineman and you get 3 SPP, okay? Or you get 6 SPP and you want to take a random double. You can fire that off and you can spike. You can be like, right, well, I'll take it. Oh, cool, I got block. Sweet. Now, one thing they have fixed in Blood Bowl 3 that I just think needs to be fixed in standard Blood Bowl as well is the differential in cost between random and standard skills. In Blood Bowl 3 Tabletop, it's half the price. In Blood Bowl 3, they saw that actually spamming those skills doesn't help, so they made the price the same. And I think that's probably the right way to go, so if you are in a league and you've got the opportunity to change it, you might as well. But it's not such an issue on Tabletop because you can't spam the games. And the reason that's an issue is because you can take the random with your lineman, and if they get a skill you want, sweet, now I've got that skill at half price. If I've got a skill I don't want, I'll fire him. It's just a lineman, he's nice and cheap, and that's definitely something you can consider. But big guys are the other one, and this is where it gets a bit challenging, and this is why someone raised this question. Okay. Do you know what? Tune into the podcast this week, because I have no doubt Milton will talk about his armbar troll. You got a big guy, they get some SPP. You get 3 SPP, you can take a random strength, generally speaking, on a big guy. You want to wait till 6 SPP so you can choose your strength, or you want to save up to 12 SPP and choose block or whatever. Most of the time, you're looking at your league and how long it's going to go. Tabletop wise, you want to save up till 6, but sometimes you're going to pull the trigger and take a random strength. If the random strength is garbage, for example, armbar, you might want to just fire him and bring him back. And again, that's to keep your team value low, and you know, it's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier to get to 6 SPP than it is to get to the 8 SPP you'd need. Now you're paying 20k for that troll skill, and it just it's one of those things that you want to consider. Okay, my big guy's got a skill that I'm not going to use. I've got pile driver on this guy and I don't want to use it. All right, do I fire him? Is it early enough in the league? Can I replace that troll? Is a troll with armbar significantly better than a troll that doesn't have armbar? That's kind of where that thought keeps in. Lineman with random, this is the ultimate spam, okay? You just chuck a general random on your lineman. Whether it's a goblin for 6 SPP or a marauder blocker for 3 and take a random general, you're looking to spike block, sure hands, tackles not bad, wrestles good times. There's a ton of really good skills, but there's also some skills that are significantly less useful. If, for example, I'm playing Khorne and my guy gets strip ball's fantastic. Well, it's shadowing is the skill, right? And to be fair, wrestle may not be ideal as well if you're a frenzy player. You might want to just go, oh, I've got 50k in the bank, I can just replace him and actually it's going to be fine. And that's the other thing, and that kind of fits into team value management. When it comes to big guys, it's more of a challenge. And when you have the cash, yeah. This is kind of luxury. The difficulty here is when you are stacking randoms, because if you spike and you take a random strength on your big guy and you get guard, and then you roll another random strength and you get pile driver or armbar or something that you're really not that interested in taking, now you've got 2 randoms and it's kind of like, well, now I'm too deep in to replace him. When you've got 1 random skill, you can fire and forget, and as long as you've got the cash, you're good to go. But the real question when it comes to hiring and firing is the significant injuries, serious injuries, your stat busts, basically. Because you've got a player and a player as a player is a player, and the player gets skills and skills are great, and then you lose a stat, and you've really got to question, right, I have now got this player with this stat busted. Do I replace him or do I keep battling? And this is where the meat of the topic comes in. So let's have a look. So stat reduction, player type, immediate replacement, and when in the league. This is where you think about it. I've got my Orc Blitzer, I'm now movement busted, I'm armor busted, I've got a gutter runner, I'm armor busted, I'm strength busted. You've got a lot to think about. What is the player trying to do? And how does that stat affect them? Can you afford to replace him immediately? And will that hamper your team and whenabouts in the league? For example, if you've got a player that is got some good skills, you're about to go into the playoffs, they're going to miss next game, they're going to come back, but they've got enough skills that it's worthwhile, even though, right, gutter runner is a cracking one. I've got a blodge step gutter runner that's now movement busted. Okay, I can have him back for the playoffs, or I fire him and I've got a vanilla gutter runner for the playoffs. That's where you kind of weigh it up. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. In fact, we're going to go straight into stat reductions because this is the biggest thing, right? And we will talk through the different types of players and the kind of the thresholds that you want to go. If you lose a passing stat, it's basically a freebie, okay? Because everyone knows passing is dead in this edition. It's not really, but generally speaking, unless you're going to be throwing halflings with your dude or throwing the ball to other elves, the stat is all right. If you have a thrower and your thrower be throwing, then yes, passing is going to suck. Otherwise, if your lineman gets pass busted, it's a gimme. It's just missed next game. I don't really care. That's fantastic. So if you lose a passing stat, it is almost always okay. -1 armor. Now this one is a little bit more complicated. Generally speaking, it's probably okay. Generally. Now, I've put 2 asterisks on that one. The first asterisk for this one is depending on position. The double asterisk here means that it's probably okay, but you have to understand that that player's days are now numbered, okay? 1 more armor is going to get them. They are a vulnerability. However, their role, for the most part, positional, positional restrictions withstanding, their role is fine. Your thrower can still throw. Your blitzer can still run around and blitz. Your runner can still run. Your catcher can still catch. Your guys can still do stuff. The armor value just means that they are going to be less available. They're going to be less reliable. And it's basically like using Jimmy Garoppolo any position on your team. It's fine. He's fine. And then it's really, really not. All right, -1 movement, maybe okay. This is the one that I think is affected by your positional type the most. If you've got a fast mover, and they're fast enough that even -1 move, they're okay, probably okay. If you've got a lineman that's still reasonably shifty, it's okay. The danger zone tends to be less than 6 for a runner or a blitzer is where you kind of want to consider. And I say a blitzer, a scoring blitzer. For a attacking blitzer, movement 5 is all right. And for linemen, movement 4, movement 5 is okay. When it comes to blockers, movement 4 is okay. And quite frankly, if a player's got enough strength, enough skill, movement 3 is okay. It depends on their role. Movement 3 is perfectly fine if that player is going to stay in the middle of the pitch and pretend to be a mummy. That's fine. Anything more than that, and the movement becomes a little bit of a challenge. Agility, probably not okay. Now, with the exception of your blockers and your brawlers, those guys who sit in the middle of the pitch and fight each other, your linemen, kind of football linemen as opposed to your linemen, they're probably all right. And your big guys, for the most part, they're not doing edge stuff. They're not dodging too much, if ever. They're not picking up the ball, if ever. I mean, we played some games this week, and if your big guy needs the ball, just roll a dice and hope you get a 6. It doesn't really matter what their agility is because they're going to be based. They're not going to be dodging anywhere because they're going to be heavily marked by other players. So actually, Edge busted on a big guy doesn't matter. On a Black Hawk blocker, on a Big 'Un blocker, on a Mummy, on a Nurgle Bloaty Boy, Edge doesn't matter because it doesn't stop them from doing what they want to do, which is small movement, big punch in. Agility means nothing because they weren't dodging anyway. So mostly, agility is bad. For any other player that wants to dodge or move or pick up the ball, agility is a bit of a bad situation. And then strength. Strength is almost always not okay. A thrower can be strength 2, that's fine. A runner could be strength 2 or even strength 1, that's fine. But you have to understand that their uselessness is increased. Their usefulness is decreased because they can no longer fight. And it depends on your game plan. Now, if you've got a pro thrower and they get strength busted, they've got on the ball, passing 2+, and they've got accurate as well, and their goal is to receive the ball, pick it up, shift it off, and you're good to go, then it's probably fine for a bit. But there will be times in that game where you would normally want to move your strength 3 thrower and then to get a 2-die block. Now he's only strength 2, it is a vulnerability. And when it comes to stunty players, again, it's all right to go to strength 1. But it is going to hamper you and it is going to affect you. And you do have to balance it massively against skills. Now, what we're going to do, though, is have a quick look at each of these skills and which players are the exception to the rule. Starting with passing. Now, I think we've basically covered this already, but the ones you want to worry about and want to consider about just getting rid of, assuming you can replace them, would be throwers that throw the ball. And also big guys that throw teammate. Because having a negative to passing, if you're throwing halflings and stuff, it is a bit of an issue. It's not the worst thing in the world though, so I wouldn't worry too much if your troll loses it. It's annoying for your tree man because, you know, that passing 5+ with strong arm, now you're passing 5+ with strong arm, but you're actually passing 6+, so it's a bit of a nuisance, but it's manageable. It's okay because with throwing teammate, it's always inaccurate. So it's going to be all right. But throwers that actually throw the ball, this is where you want to think, okay, where am I in the league? Is this skill set that I've got good enough that I want to balance it out? And I suppose this is the point where you really have to do, quite simply, maths on this one. I'm losing 1 passing stat for my thrower. Do I have 2 or more skills that I would rather have than that passing stat? And a fair thing to think about is how often you're actually passing with the thrower. Once, twice a game. If you've got block and you're using more as a runner, as a running passer, actually, you can probably get away with it. If you're early enough in your league and you've got the cash and it's going to upset you because part of your strategy, for example, you're running Skaven and what you want to do is have your movement 7 thrower, move up anywhere in the backfield and then take a 2+, 3+ pass to a gutter runner who can then shifty. A -1 passing is a bit of an issue, and if you're early enough in the league and you've got the cash to replace them, it's almost a no-brainer because their role is to move around, pick up the ball, and throw the ball to the runner. If you're playing a human team, if you're playing a, humans, elves are probably the one where you want to think, okay, My elves are agile. They've got good agility. They've got good passing. I'm going to be able to farm SPP and I'm going to be able to replace that skill quickly. That's when you can do it. So passing, you really only want to worry about it if it's your thrower that's actually throwing. And then maybe, yeah, if you've got the cash and they don't have block and leader, which kind of weighs it out, you're good to go to get rid of them. Okay, armor. A good time, not a long time. So if you have a player who is armor busted, you have to kind of accept that they will do everything they did before except take a hit. And if it is right, and this is for every player type, if it's a lineman or a blocker that's going on the line, they can punch, they can move just as fine. But when they get punched back, you are down a portion of a player, and you've got to kind of think about it in that regard. An armor busted player feels like the equivalent of 75% of a player. So if you've got 11 men on the roster and one of them's armor busted, you've got to be thinking, I'm kind of playing with 10.5 because this guy's going down. Now, if your armor 9 player is busted down to armor 8, it's obviously not that bad, but that's what they do. They're designed to do a particular thing. And if they've got armor 9, if they've got armor 10, their role is to be in combat or to stop other people from doing things. They're going to get punched. So that armor reduction is going to mean that their days are numbered. Now, there are some factors here that you can use to kind of counterbalance that in a beautiful way. Block, dodge, wrestle. These are skills that are going to keep them alive. This is very important if you're thinking to yourself, I've got a gutter runner, I've got an elven catcher, I've got a human catcher that is armor busted. Do I need to get rid of them? If they're vanilla and you've got time, and you've got cash, then probably, because what's going to happen is they're going to go out for the game. It might just be a KO, might be right, but they're going to go for a particular point of the game, probably. The difference is if they are so good at scoring, it's fine. And if they've got block or dodge that's going to keep them from their armor even being brought into question, then it becomes a lot easier. An armor 7+ gutter runner with block and dodge is not much more vulnerable than an armor 8+ gutter runner that just has dodge. It's going to get blocked less, your armor's going to get rolled less, and that extra point is going to be kind of balanced off. So the big measurement here is if you've got one of those evasion skills, one of those safety skills, it almost makes up for a point of your armor. So you can kind of balance it off. An armor busted gutter runner that has block already, might as well keep him because he's still fast, he's still evasive, and actually he'll be just as durable. If he doesn't have that, yeah, I'd start saving your cash now, which was my next point. If you've got an armor busted positional that's got skills that you want to retain, you need to start saving now. If my gutter runner that's got leap and sidestep and block gets armor busted, I'm going to lose him again soon. Might just be for a next game. It might be movement, it might be agility, which it might be strength, which I would consider being very, very bad for a gutter runner. And at that point, you might want to think, I'm going to save cash. And depending on where you are in the league, if you're coming up to the finals, if you're coming up to the end of the season, and you've got cash, and you've got a few games, and you've got a fast-moving catcher, it might be worth pulling the plug early so you can level up, because it might be better off going in to the finals with an armor 8+ blodge gutter runner rather than an armor 7+ blodge step gutter runner, because you're going up against other teams too. So that would be my thing on armor. When it comes to linemen, when it comes to blockers, when it comes to blitzers or throwers, it's just a matter of time before they get splatted, no matter what their role is. But if you are willing to risk it for a few more games because they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing quite well, you're good to go. Talking of going places, movement. So what have I got for movement? Blockers and brawlers. So what I've done here is I've considered what my minimum movement would be for certain types of players. So blockers and brawlers, I don't mean Black Orc brawlers, I mean players that are meant to be in the thick of it on the line of slaughter. That means your big guys. That's your tentacle monster from Nurgle. That's your ogre on chaos teams, and your trolls on underworld teams. Blockers, you know, you've got your Black Orcs, you've got your big uns. Those players that just want to be on the line, punched and being punched. Movement 4 is fine. So if your big un loses a point of movement, you're all right. Anything less than that, you start thinking. Actually, movement 3, if you've got a strength 4 player with a good combat skill, perfectly fine. It's just a version of a mummy. So 4 is the point where you want to think, right, I can go below that, but I cannot maneuver with him, and it's going to be a bit of dead weight. It's actually very manageable. Sometimes he's going to get left behind, but movement 4 to movement 3 is okay for players that are doing that stuff. They can still punch, they can still be punched. That's all right. When it comes to blitzers or strikers, so you say blitzer in Blood Bowl and you think about, right, here's my movement 7, strength 3, edge 3+ piece that's good in fighting, good in scoring. You've got that mid-range piece. Strikers are the ones who are particularly involved in going and punching dudes. Blitzers are kind of your catch-all, you know, your run and gun player. Movement 5, anything lower than that is a massive red flag. Now, I don't think that really happens with the exception of the Dwarf Blitzer. If the Dwarf Blitzer goes down to movement 4, that is a concern. If the Troll Slayer goes down to movement 4, that is a concern, because the sphere of scoring and the sphere of striking becomes so small that it becomes, basically, it means that it can't do what that player wants to do. Movement, like a movement busted Troll Slayer can't slay trolls because he can't get to them. And that causes a bit of a problem. If your Orc Blitzer drops down to movement 5, he is going to be slower, but you can still score in 2 turns. And I think that is the point here. If you've got, with Go For It's, less than 7 movement with a Blitzer or a Striker, you can't reach the whole pitch. You've got movement 7, movement 6, you can cover. If he's in the centre, you can cover left, you can cover right, you can score with 2 Go For It's from the line of scrimmage. You've got that flexibility and that movement. When that drops below that, for players who are designed to do that, so your Orc Blitzer, your Human Blitzer, Elven Blitzers, Skaven Blitzers, their role is to be wherever you need them to be and to be reliable in doing so. If they get so slow they can't do that, that's the point at which you really have to balance, okay, what is their role? And this is really key, because if your Blitzer is actually a brawler, okay, he's a blocker, what he wants to do is just take his armor, take his mighty blow guard block and be on the line, then he's a blocker brawler. He's not a Blitzer. A Blitzer is a scoring threat that can also attack things, a pinpoint fighter. Someone who's in the mix is a brawler and their movement can be less. So if you've got orcs, this is the big one. If my Orc Blitzer gets movement busted, do I fire him? You've got high armor, reasonable strength, you've got block. Most importantly, there's 3 other Blitzers. So you can keep him, but bear in mind, he's your reserve Blitzer now because his role is changed, but you can still keep him. Runners and scorers, movement 6 or above, anything less than that and what we just talked about, it becomes very difficult to do what they're trying to do. So I'm trying to think. Your movement busted thrower on the Skaven team, not a problem. Your movement busted Orc thrower is a problem, because movement 4 thrower, now you're playing, well, I don't know, there isn't a movement 4 thrower. You are now slower than a Tomb King. That is an issue. Tomb Kings are already too slow. If you are slower than a Tomb King and your role is to pick up the ball and run with it, you've got a problem. So at that point, you kind of have to fire them. Big guys depends on roles. C above for strikers and brawlers. So your ogre, your troll, if they're movement 3, it's fine because you can stick them on the line. If they've got guard to make it worthwhile, if they've got mighty blow or claw to make it worthwhile, and their job is to stand there to punch and be punched in the melee in the beginning, that's fine. If you've got a minotaur or a rat ogre with good movement and their job is to punch a hole for you, movement is more key. So it's all about the role. Can I make do? And I guess the other thing that really has to be important here is whenabouts is it in the league? Can I make do with a movement busted roger, but my roger's got jugs, and actually I think I'd rather have a slow rat ogre than no rat ogre, because I'm going into the finals. We've only got a few weeks left of the league. Okay, I can make do. If it's the early in the league, your roger gets busted, you've got enough cash to replace him. 1 skill for 1 movement. Get him gone, get a new one. Agility is a very useful stat in Blood Bowl. It's all about picking up the ball, and in Blood Bowl the ball is quite important, just to remind some of you out there. Also dodging is quite important too. So agility is a real tough one. If you've got blockers, brawlers, big guys though, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's going to come up every now and again. If your Black Orc goes from Edge 4+ to 5+, it doesn't really matter. If your Ogre goes from 4+ to 5+, it doesn't really matter. Ball Centaurs already suck at picking up the ball and dodging. You go from it's risky to even riskier, but it was already risky. The issue with agility is when you go from safe to not safe. And blitzers are a really interesting mid-range here. We just talked about them. They kind of need to be mobile and they need to be tough. Agility, depending on the type of team you're rolling, is potentially passable. If you go and, right, if you're Edge 3+, anything worse than that, it's just bad. But you can make do. If you've got a team with multiple of that player type, multiple blitzers, Orcs are a cracking example, you can have an Edge busted Orc blitzer, no worries, because you've got 3 ordinary ones. Humans are exactly the same. Skaven, a little bit more challenging, but actually you've got 1 fast blitzer, you've got 1 slow blitzer then. Their job then becomes more of a brawler, more of a blocker. They are there to fight, they are there to punch things. They won't be able to dodge away, and that's okay. They won't really be there to carry the ball, and that's okay, as long as you think about it and kind of compensate for it, and your roster has the ability for you to do so. Orcs are a really interesting one. You've got the thrower, in theory, you've got the goblin, in theory, but the blitzers are the guys who are punching, and they are also picking up the ball. So Edge busted Orc blitzer on his own, or in a team where you can only take 2, quite an issue. But where you can take 4, you can have 1 slow, you can have 1 crippled blitzer, and it's fine. Runners and throwers, however, if your job is to pick up the ball, and that stat is there to pick up the ball, losing an agility is almost a career ender. If you've got a runner whose job it is to dodge out of places, it's a career ender. If you are losing a point of agility on your thrower to pick up the ball, on your gutter runner to catch it, on an elf just to do stuff and get out, 2+ to 3+ is brutal. Now, there are some rosters where you can get away with it by taking break tackle to give you cheeky +1, to give you 2 heads to give you cheeky +1, to bring you back in that 2+ realm. It's manageable. But throwers, runners, they tend to get good access to SPP. So if it's early enough in your league, you should be able to get rid of them and farm SPP on your new ones to bring them up to a standard level. It is almost always worse to run with an experienced player with 1 less agility if their job involves using that stat. A vanilla gutter runner is better than an Edge busted gutter runner with skills, because the main focus is going to be to use that Edge to get the ball, to get away with it. Linemen and other, though, don't worry about it. It is going to hamper you. If you can afford to replace a lineman or any other player that has got no skill ups, do it if they suffer a stat boost. If you don't have the cash, or they've got a stat or a skill that you want, so if you've got a lineman with block and it gets Edge busted, that's fine. But you have to be conscious that they're not as available as they would normally be. In fact, that's probably the golden rule for all of this, is if you've got a vanilla player that gets stat busted and you've got enough cash to replace them, do it always. It's when they have skills, that's when it becomes the issue, and particularly when in the league, because linemen kind of bring this to fruition a little bit too much. You're running a roster with 12, 13 linemen. Do you want that 13th lineman to be an Edge busted, a move busted piece just to throw him on the line to die? He's free for now, so you might as well. And strength for the last skill, the last stat, sorry. So high Edge with skills, you can get away with it. And what I mean by that is you've got a gutter runner that's got block and dodge. You've got Elven Catcher that's got dodge. You've got these players that are vulnerable, but the skills kind of make up for it. If your player is specifically designed to not punch and to not be punched, strength means nothing. Except for when they get caught. So if you've got a thrower that's real good at throwing and they get stat busted in the strength department, don't worry too much. It will hamper you, it will hamper the flexibility, but if they've already got a couple of great skills, and basically what you're saying is that their role is not affected by that stat being reduced. You know, you've got your strength 4 block guard blocker on the line. He's lost an agility. I don't care. He doesn't need it. He's lost his movement. I don't care. He doesn't need it. His job is to stay here and fight things. It's the same with strength. If your job is to stay not here and not fight things, strength means nothing until it does. Because it's going to make you more vulnerable in the same way that armor does. If you've got 1 less strength, you are going to get more effectively punched and you are going to get targeted. But if your job is to throw the ball really well or run around with it and avoid other players, then it's okay. And this is why I think dump off, Trips and I disagree on this, why I think dump off is not a great skill, is because I don't want to put skills on a player just to be punched. I'd rather that player didn't get punched. I'd rather they had a skill to stop them from being punched at all. And actually, if your player is really trying hard not to get punched, you can get away with it. But if you let them get punched, it's not going to go well, which isn't a surprise. When it comes to almost everyone else, get rid of them if you can afford it, and if you're at a point in the league where it's not going to absolutely, stuff you. The only exception is potentially a tree man with a good skill can go down from 6 to 5, and they're still big enough to 2-die block most people. Other big guys I wouldn't retain. Blockers I wouldn't retain. Blitzers I wouldn't retain. Anyone whose job is to punch and be punched, they are not going to do well with a stat bust. That is a career-ending injury. You want to farm them off as soon as you can replace them, and depending on when they are in the league. The only kind of exception to that, and specifically when it comes to strength, is if they're big enough that they're going to be able to hit anyway, and they've got skills that you really want to use. So, a big guy with claws and mighty blow. I know they don't stack, but they're still a terrifying combo. You can still get effective 2-die blocks. You just have to work around it. And if it's at that point of the league and you've got some juicy targets, that actually claw mighty blow at strength 4 is going to be better than strength 5 mighty blow, then you can balance it out. But as a general rule, if your job is to not be punched, strength is fine. If your job is to punch and be punched, strength is not fine. All right, that turned into a much longer video than I expected because there's actually so much to talk about. And it's a really visceral element of Blood Bowl, especially on the tabletop. I've spent 2 months playing 6 games with this team. I've got this player and I've got them a cool skill, and now my Elf Blitzer is edge busted. My Elf Blitzer is strength busted. His career is now over, right? Yeah, probably. Orcs are different. Humans are different. Teams that have 4 of a positional, you can let 1 or 2 of them become a bit naff because you still got 2 primo pieces that you can make do. You know what? Otherwise, and if you got the cash and if you got the time, it's almost always better to replace a player. Anyway, let me know what you think, and I want to know your edge cases for this. I've got this player, I didn't fire them, and it's been great. Because what you will see, and this is the beautiful thing about Blood Bowl League, you get 3-4 skills deep, that player is no longer that player anymore anyway. You've got a blitzer with 4 skills. He's no longer a blitzer. He is now a character. He is now his own positional. And actually, that's the point where it becomes balancing. And that's the point it becomes really fun. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to support the channel even further, please like and subscribe. It really does help us out. Or come join us on YouTube Members or in Patreon, where you can get exclusive access to some content, some loot, early access to basically everything we do, as well as regular competitions. Or you can pick up some Bonehead Podcast loot either on our website at boneheadpodcast.com. We've got the Dungeon Bowl things, we've got tokens and stuff like that, or on our Spreadshirt site as well. Everything you do just helps us make more content and hopefully do it of better quality. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Happy blocking.